What's up guys, it's Taken here, and this video is going to be about the new Flame Knight spec. So the Flame Knights came out yesterday, only on iOS, so I couldn't test them out in-game, but yeah, I got the spec. And before I start, special thanks going to Tringle, Order and Chaos, so he made this video possible and sent me all the screenshots from the spec. So yeah, thanks to you man, and now let's get into the video. Alright, so let's start with the Garrison spec, and this is like the tank spec from the Flame Knight. And just by looking at the basic talent tree skill, so it's the Blessed by Flame, and just when looking at this is just intense what this class can do. So I mean, they get a general buff of the stamina by 40%, and that's just twice as much as the tanks get. And furthermore, the armor is increased, they receive less physical and spell damage, and yes, always the damage is nerfed for that, but this is just something that makes this class really possible, or makes them able to tank in dungeons or PvP. Furthermore, this will provide you the revenge buff, and this will increase the skill damage and HP restoration received from skills. So general, this will just buff the class more from what it can be healed, or what it receives from damage will be nerfed. Next skill is Apocalypse Incoming, and this is something like a general aggro skill, so all targets will lock onto you, and this is something really annoying for PvP, but also good for PvE to drag the damage from the team. Next one is Earthen Crown, and this will just decrease the cooldown time of Lightbringer and Creeping Death by 100% when you're triggered Metamorphosis, and this is something like an avatar for the class. And in general, when you transform into this, you get like the awesome wings, yeah, but with a DPS or tank as class, you always get so many buffs and decreased cooldown times if you trigger this, and this is something making the class really powerful when you trigger the Metamorphosis. Next one is Hand of Light, and this removes the Light Hold effect. I don't know what it is exactly, but furthermore, this will aggro again all targets, so this is something like you have two aggro skills, and this will make you will give you the ability to tank. Light Commander, and this is something like the general skill of a tank, so your parry chance will increase by 15%, and the parry chance will even increase by 25% when you've triggered the Metamorphosis, and there you can see it again, you get like 10% higher parry chance just by triggering the Metamorphosis. Stronger Than Death, so this is something like the Courage of a tank, just that you will instantly recover 40% of your HP, and considering that you get in PvP around 20,000 HP, and in PvE it's just so easily possible to get like 30 to 50,000 HP, it's like you just instantly heal 10 to 20,000 of your HP, and this is just intense. So in exchange for that, the HP of yourself will decrease by 5%, which isn't that much actually. So with Fruits of Faith, you can basically increase the healing power of Bathed in Light by another 30%, so this skill won't only heal 5% of your maximum health, but 6.5%, so it doesn't seem that much, but it's basically another healing skill, which is always good. The Sun Shield, this is basically built up on the last skill, and if you skill this and activate it, you absorb damage equal to 10% of your maximum health. So only when you trigger Metamorphosis, but considering that with all the buffs you can basically increase your HP by such a high amount, and then considering 10% of that amount is just absorbed of damage, I guess it would be at least 3,000 to 5,000 damage that is generally absorbed by this. Sunrise Shadows, this basically decreases the costs of Bathed in Light if your HP is below 35%. This is like a general skill many classes have. If the HP drops below a special amount, they get special buffs. Next one, this is the Flame Vortex, and in this place on the specs there's like generally the most powerful I've seen. So this deals 86% main hand weapon damage and an additional 310 fire damage to all enemies within 8 meters, and this is something like an intense area of effect damage. When in Metamorphosis, this will turn into a time damage skill, so then we'll drag the enemy's HP over time and not at once. And furthermore, by this, any ally or friend will receive 15% less magical damage. Build up on this, you can spec Fear of Fire, and with this, your Flame Vortex decreases the enemy's mana, vigor or moral by 15 points or 5%, and this is just so powerful versus any enemy. Because you gotta consider a Sin or Archer, they always run out of vigor, and a DPS war can't attack you if he has less moral, so this is just so powerful versus enemy DPSs and just debuffs the enemy team a lot. Also with the Flame Vortex, you can increase the effects of Flame Vortex magical damage reduction from 15% to 40%, making the overall magical damage your team receives 40% less, and this is just like a prey, so it's really powerful to use this. The next skill we got here is Burden Bearer, and with this you can basically transfer 30% of an ally's received damage to the Flame Knight, so to yourself for 8 seconds, and in any dungeon or PvP this might be so useful considering the healer or the mage don't have that much armor, and if you basically just drag 30% of the damage they would get to yourself, this gives them a big advantage. And the two skills that you can improve for this one is the first one, and with this the overall damage you drag from them is raised to 60%, and this is just a lot. This is like the diploma rings. Making this skill really useful is the Rising Flames, because with this the damage you drag from the ally, which you would actually receive, is set to 0. So you drag the damage off the ally, but you don't even receive it by yourself. So this makes the skill really useful. And the last skill is Kaline's Grace. With this, your overall maximum HP will be increased by 30%, and the bonus healing by 35% for 10 seconds. And this is just like the proc of a tank, so it makes you just really powerful. You get healed a lot more, plus you get a 30% HP bonus, which is just a lot. Alright, let's continue with the Blazer, and this is like the DPS spec for a Flame Knight. So if you set the general talent tree skill, the Deathbringer, your overall weapon damage is increased by 35%, and if you score a melee hit, you have a 100% to restore 5% of your mana, so this is like the melee, they get the mana back if they hit with melee attacks by a chance. And furthermore, permanently there's an increase of your default power by 30 and maximum power by 20. This is like the vigor or the moral bar. It's overall bigger than the one for the tank. That's like DPS war and tank comparison as well. The first skill is the Flame Tracer, and this is like the Shadow Blink, or I don't know the DPS war's name, like the rush towards the target, and also the stun condition on the target that you will give them. Build up on this, you can spec Sparkstorm, and this will basically increase the stun duration by 100%, and this is like 3 seconds of a stun that you give the target by the rush. The Silent Chain, this will decrease the duration time of the light hook's slow effect by 100%, but also the target will get silenced for 3 seconds, so this is something like you gotta consider speccing this versus healers or mage, because the silence is always more powerful than a stun versus them. Next is Crown of Flame, and this is like a normal attack. You deal main hand weapon fire damage and in addition to fire damage, so with this you always gotta consider the other specs, which will increase your flame damage overall, because all your powers or your attacks will get more powerful if you get a buff on your fire damage, because the skills are based on fire damage a lot. And as usual, if you triggered the Metamorphosis, your damage will increase by another 20%. So next one is the Shallow Grave, and with this your Crown Flames effect zone changes into a cone, and the damage is decreased by 20% when you've triggered the Metamorphosis, but for that it's like more area of effect damage overall to any target, not to a single one. The Silent Strike deals basically main hand weapon damage and in addition physical damage, not only like the magical or fire damage. and this will silence the target, and it will always hurt 2 more nearby targets, so it hits like the main target plus 2 more targets if you triggered the metamorphosis, and you will also recover 30 power, which I don't know how much points you use for your attacks, but I think like 30 power is about 1 attack that you can just trigger additional. Build up on this, there is Strike Force, and with this, the Silent Strike will slow the target by 75% for 3 seconds when the target is casting a spell, so this is like the melee's Tiger Kick, so you interrupt them or you just stun them by this, and in this case it's like a slowing. Spark Charge, and this will deal main hand weapon damage and an additional melee damage, and as well this restores 5 power per second for 10 seconds, and this is like I don't know what the name was for the Slaughter Banquet for this sin, so you get just more vigor or moral back, and you can just attack faster if you triggered this. Alright, Shockwave, so this is a skill I really like and which is just so powerful to control enemy teams in PvP, because it's just like the Frost Blast of a mage, because you stun any target for 4 seconds, and this is basically a lot, plus you deal damage, and it's for a 6 meter radius, so it's like a pretty big area of effect, and you just stun any target for 4 seconds while that. Build up on this, there's Northern Winds, and the Shockwave even removes all control effects, but the cooldown time is decreased by 10 seconds, but when I gotta consider I got a debuff, and I can instantly stun the target plus my own debuff will end. This is just powerful. Alright, Energy Conversion, and this is a skill that basically if you spec it you deal a lot more DPS, but you lose your defensive, cause with the Spark Storm you got a lot more power back, so you could deal like more damage because you can trigger more attacks, and with this skill you get a 100% increase of your power regeneration, so it's like you can deal a lot more DPS if you spec this, but the disadvantage is that Lightbringer and Creeping Death, their effect will be decreased by 30%, and those were like the skills to recover your HP and stuff, so they will be decreased by 30%, so there you gotta make the decision. Would you want a lot more DPS and be able to trigger more attacks, or do you want more defensive skills? Solar Storm, and this deals 86% main hand weapon damage and as always fire damage as well, but the skill's effect changes to damage over time if you trigger Metamorphosis again, so it's always like either you hit a single target or when in Metamorphosis you hit damage on all targets. And furthermore, the target will get a debuff which will increase the fire damage they receive by 5%, and you can stack this up by 5 times, so it's like the enemies would get 25% more damage from yourself if you triggered this effect several times on them. The Solar Flare makes this even more powerful because the vulnerability will increase to 10%, so you can stack it up 5 times by 5%, but 5 times by 10%, so the overall damage the enemy receives by you is increased by 50%, so it's like 1.5 times more damage through this. As well you can spec the Supernova, and with this the Solar Storm will decrease the duration of control effects on allies by 75%, so this is something that will help the team a lot. But in exchange for that the cooldown time is increased by 25 seconds, so I don't know, 25 seconds is pretty long considering PvP fights, but this is just something like you always gotta decide, would you want a more powerful spell once and a longer cooldown time, or use the spell more often but just with less power. And the last spell is the Kaline's Blessing, and this would just increase the spell damage by 20%, and the melee attacks now trigger a slow condition, so this is something like a really powerful skill because you slow the target and you deal more damage. Alright guys, so this is my basic commentary on the new Flame Knight spec. I hope you liked it. Yeah, I couldn't test it out in-game, so I'm not sure how the specs or how the skills gonna work out in-game, but I hope I can test it out soon and then give you a really good spec that would fit for PvP or PvE when I tested it out, but yeah, never mind. So thanks once more for the guy who sent me this spec, I really appreciate that, and yeah, I will keep you guys informed about the update when it's out on Android and show you stuff in-game. So yeah, until then, it's Taken here, and stay tuned.